Well, it wouldn't be a Zack Goller Halloween special if I didn't include some Stephen King in there. Children of the Corn is one of those flicks growing up, and again, this is going back to my dad's Halloween Horror Nights every Friday, but he would basically show us a scary movie, and this was basically my big introduction into the genre. And Children of the Corn was one of those movies that just got to me when I was a kid. And I can get into the main reason of why it did so, but looking back on it now, oh, okay, let's take off the rose-colored glasses for a second. We follow a physician and his girlfriend who drive across the Midwest to his new job. But their trip comes to a sudden halt when they encounter the body of a murdered boy in the road. And in trying to contact the authorities, Bert and Vicky wander into a small town populated only by children. A cult of children, basically. They follow a sinister young preacher named Isaac. And the couple is basically forced to go on the run. They're outlanders. They're adults. The kids have killed all of the adults. And the Outlanders are basically Isaac's key to this ceremony he wants to conduct in the cornfield. And he wants to sacrifice them to their demonic deity, he who walks behind the rose. Stephen King is arguably the greatest writer in horror history. I'm sure most people, if not everybody, knows who Stephen King actually is, even if they're not into the genre. This guy has a lot of classics to his credit. Misery, It's The Shawshank Redemption, but every so often there are short stories of his like Children of the Corn which get the film treatment. And man, does it feel like a short story, because at an hour and a half, it feels kind of slow-paced. Because a lot of the jump scares in this movie are false jump scares. Like, you think it's gonna be a demon or a kid coming to creep up and kill our main character, but then it just turns out to be his girlfriend, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're clearly meandering a little bit. It's just kind of going in circles. But I can't deny, man, I mean, this movie, like, even looking back on it now, it's laughably entertaining. Hell, I own the Arrow Video version of this on Blu-ray. I mean, that is just such a creepy looking slipcover with Isaac on the front right there. Like, God, like, look at that face. There's just something that feels so nostalgic about this movie for me. I don't know if it was because it really got to my head when I was younger, and I just look at it now and I'm like, this is not that scary. If younger Zack were here right now, I'd be calling him a big-ass wimp. But I think for people to call this an absolute atrocity, I think would be a bit inaccurate. Because I think if you look across the board at the acting in this movie especially, like, they are all in on this. I think Peter Horton does a solid job as Bert. I can definitely tell that he is a physician. He definitely feels like a guy who is very calm under pressure and knows how to handle these situations. As someone who just became a doctor, he seems like he's a game manager here. Vicky, on the other hand, played by Linda Hamilton, is very underdeveloped. She's very cookie cutter by comparison. And it's not like Linda Hamilton does a bad job in this at all. She's certainly giving it her best. But Vicky is absolutely not as well developed as Bert is. And let me ask you this question real quick. I don't remember whether or not this movie came out before or after The Terminator. I know they came out in the same year, but how weird is it in hindsight to look at Linda Hamilton in this movie and then just wonder why she isn't just kicking these kids' ass? Like, how weird is it to have Peter Horton tell Sarah Connor to wait in the car? Like, you have Sarah Connor there. She is well trained. Like, she should just go in there and mow people down. I'm not saying that Sarah Connor is going to define Linda Hamilton's career or her reputation, but again, when these two movies both come out in the same year and these roles are so vastly different, I think that speaks to Linda Hamilton's talent overall. You want to talk about talent, though? All the children that they got in this movie and all the people that they got to portray children in one specific case, they're all really great. The two young actors they got to play Job, our narrator, and his younger sister Sarah are adorable. There's one scene where they go into their old abandoned house. There's no parents around anymore, and they're just sitting around and they're playing Monopoly. You owe me $1,300 million. 1,300 million? Like, my family, when we have game nights on the holidays, we play Monopoly, and competitive Monopoly at that. It's like, it kind of takes you back to a time. Again, there's that word, nostalgia, again, with this movie. Like, it just makes me feel like I'm a young boy watching this. I will say that Job's narration kind of is written to make him sound like a bit of a tool. It's not like the stuff he's saying is bad or anything. We weren't the only ones who thought Isaac was weird. Which, time out for a second. Slaughtering people in a haunting opening sequence in a local diner, that falls into the weird category. Like, it's just stuff like that I can't help but laugh at now. We also have the very dangerous trope of the psychic child that doesn't really have a reason as to why she's psychic, because the little sister Sarah happens to draw a bunch of little pictures here, and she's basically predicting every horrible, morbid thing that's gonna go down in this little town. And we do not know how she has these abilities. But this is why our villains keep these kids alive, is because not only are they kids and they're part of them, but Sarah is found to be valuable because she can kind of see into the future. Could you imagine how much more creepy this would have been if they actually explained that? Speaking of the villains, again, all these kids who belong to Isaac's cult are just throwing everything they've got into this. Now, Isaac's main disciple in this is named Malachi. He's played by Courtney. I don't know what it is about Malachi, but he's written to be like a skater dude. And I don't know if it's his delivery or what, but I just get a chuckle every time I hear him speak. He's the god of blood and sacrifice, not ceremony. I've saved Isaac for last, played by John Franklin, because he is undeniably, no one even comes close. John Franklin is the best freaking thing in this film. Even though this guy was actually 25 years old when he played this 10-year-old demonic creature, he still comes across as this snot-nosed little pissant. Like, you don't care how he got the authority in the first place. You just can't help but be gravitated towards every little thing he does. I am the word and the giver of his laws. And you know, you're actually kind of sad when he actually is turned against by his entire cult. Malachi basically decides to sacrifice Isaac instead of Vicky. And when Isaac is actually jiffy popped all the way down into hell or whatever it is. I know what I said. It's very, very silly. But that brings me to the scene that really got to me when I was younger. I thought Isaac was done for, and then you hear this. Malachi! He wants you too, Malachi. Just proceeds to break Malachi's neck after that, and then, you know, after those two are done for, and those two are dispatched of, like, I don't want to say the third act and the climax becomes a bit gratuitous, and I don't want to say Children of the Corn overstays its welcome, but it kind of does. I mean, once Isaac and Malachi both kick the bucket, like, I feel like a bunch of the entertainment value is gone. That brings me to He Who Walks Behind the Rose. Okay, this demon that they come across, this is so freaking dumb. Not when you first see this thing, like, rolling in the dirt in the cornfield. The practicality of it, I think if you kept it like that, that would have been freaky as hell. Because again, it's all subjective. It leaves it up to the audience's imagination to see what this thing actually looks like. But when Bert, who is not religious at all, is inspired by this Bible passage to destroy the field with fire, you actually see a cauliflower face on this thing as it explodes. And we're like, that was what we were supposed to be afraid of? This thing? Like, you should have just kept it a mystery. And not only that, this movie came out in 1984. Clearly, the effects are not as great as they would have been 40 years later. And as some movies that we'll be talking about later on in this playlist will prove, you can do stuff practically. Yeah, that's one thing looking back on it that's like, why were you scared of that? Like, why should anybody be scared of this? I will say this, just based on the entertainment level alone of both Isaac and Malachi, this movie is a million times better than the Children of the Corn remake we got earlier this year. Like, it's not even close. And I think my nostalgic bias towards this movie will ultimately make me think that it's actually better than it is. But this is curiously not a good movie. Every year I gotta do Stephen King, and sometimes you can't really have all good movies in this special. I'm gonna give Children of the Corn a C. I admire all the performers' effort, especially from John Franklin, who is a national treasure that has to be preserved for all time. But yeah, can't win them all, sadly. Let me know what you thought of Children of the Corn down in the comments section below. And what is your favorite Stephen King adaptation of all time? Loads of things that we can discuss and then some. I love making these videos, and I love discussing movies with you guys all the time. So do consider subscribing and tap on that thumbs up as well, especially if you want to keep up to date with the rest of my Halloween special, and if you want to hear my thoughts on all the new releases coming out in cinemas. Look forward to more great content hitting the channel very soon. I'm very excited to announce that this final week in the Halloween special, the final 6 movies, we're just gonna do all fun ones. And we're gonna stay in the year 1984 because it's a movie I've wanted to talk about for a long time here on YouTube. We're gonna look at the original Ghostbusters. Should be a ton of fun, y'all. You guys are the best. Thank you again for tuning in. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.